In Unity 6.5, they introduced the ability to reference visual elements into inspector fields just like you could with UI elements. So here I have a player HUD object and there's a player HUD script. You'll notice I have a help bar reference. If I actually go inside my player HUD and under my UXML, you can actually see I have a template and I have a couple of buttons, and I can actually drag the help bar visual element into my player HUD, and I can also drag different buttons into my player HUD. Heads up, whenever you're wanting to start using a lot of the newer features inside Unity, especially from 6.5 and up, instead of using UI document, make sure you're using a panel renderer. And also, whenever you put the source asset in here, this is when you should be able to start seeing like the visual elements inside of your UXML template. If you do not see them inside of the hierarchy, go to Project Settings, UI Toolkit, and near the very bottom of the UI Toolkit settings, there's a thing that says Enable Hierarchy Integration. If you do not have that turned on, you will not be able to see it inside of the hierarchy, and you won't be able to drag and actually drop like visual elements into the actual inspector fields. Okay, to be able to use the Visual Element Reference API, you just declare Visual Element Reference. If you need to have a specific type for validation and also for filtering out stuff, you can actually pass in any visual element. So if we actually go to Visual Element Reference, you'll see type T, accepts any visual element. So if you know what type you need to reference, you can actually do this. So you can see here, increase button is Visual Element Reference button. And also if we go into my actual Unity editor, you'll notice that whenever I click on the increase button ref, it only allows me to choose buttons. So that's actually how you filter out other types. That's why player health bar is not appearing there. You just say visual element and then whatever type you want to guarantee is that. Do note, if you are needing to do dynamic visual element referencing and you don't know what type of visual element is going to be set, if you go into the visual element reference type T, you'll notice it inherits from a base visual element reference. So if you do not know what type of visual element you need to reference, you can just use the very base parent class and use that. Do note this is a class. It's not like a pure C# class. It's not a component. It's not an object and so forth. So whenever you are creating the variables, you want to say equals new. And the reason why is if you're doing a code reload and you're inside of like a scene, Unity will go ahead and say, hey, even though this is private and it's not serialized, we see the equal new thing. We'll go ahead and create a class of it. That way there's no null values. And the reason why that's important is even inside of like edit mode, if you notice, like, even though I'm not in edit mode, the UXML is still showing all its child elements and the panel renderer is still showing all that stuff. Even in edit mode, these private variables are still being used. So if they're null, you could run into some fun times. So make sure even on non-serialized private values, go ahead and say equals new just for your own safety and sanity. But after you declare them, you are probably wondering, well, how do I start using them from there? I mean, you saw it, you can drag in from the scene and hierarchy, but there's more than that. So let's show off a couple API things. So I have my help bar ref here, and I have a set reference. Do note this set reference is specifically for whenever you're not setting it inside the scene or inside a hierarchy, or if you already have a value but you need to change it out. So like, for example, if I actually go here, I'm going to actually set this to none. I'm going to go, so you can see none here. When I hit play, you can see that even though I hit none, it actually still got set. So that's actually this line of code. So this is actually how you set a value outside of scene, but inside of the dynamic API. You'll notice it takes into your panel render. This needs to be the panel render that it is a part of, that your source asset that has the actual visual element is part of, or you'll get an error. And then you'll notice I have a help bar ID. Well, this is where the fun part of the video comes into. So how does Unity keep track of a pure C# class that's not serialized or not an object or anything like that, like a Unity object? Array of integers. I'm not kidding. So each visual element reference, if we actually go to the very base class, you'll notice that there's a thing called AuthoringIdPath. What is an AuthoringIdPath? Well, if we actually go into it, it's literally an array of integers to keep track of. And then during runtime, it turns those integer arrays into a read-only span for performance. That way it actually runs better and your game has better performance in memory management. And that's it. So how does this work? Well, if I actually go back into the scene view, you'll notice I have a health bar ID. I have 1, 10 random set of numbers, right? Well, not so random. Let's actually go into the player HUD. So this is the main UXML that's actually set inside my panel renderer. If you notice, my health bar has an offering ID of 1, and it is a template. So the AuthoringIdPath actually keeps track of what order of visual elements the panel renderer has to go through to actually find the correct reference. So if I say inside of the editor 110, what it'll do is in the root of the panel renderer, it'll first look for a visual element that has offering ID of 1. It'll know that's the visual element to go into, so it'll go into this one. And if we actually go into our player HUD bars, oh look, offering ID 10, and you'll notice it's a progress bar. So Unity will go 1, 10, because that's how I set it up inside of the inspector. And that is actually how Unity keeps track of things. Do note, I have not found a way to actually set these inside the UI builder. I had to actually set them inside of the actual UXML file, so I had to open them inside IDE. So just keep that in mind. But yeah, so that's actually how offering IDs work. So basically, after you get a health bar ID, I just pass it in, and that sets the reference. Do note, again, this is for dynamic set values. This is if you're not setting them in scene view, you don't have to worry about this. I would go ahead and even if you're setting things inside of scene view, I would go ahead and if you know there's going to be using visual element reference, whether it's just inside inspector or dynamic encode, go ahead and give it an offering ID. It can help prevent bugs and save your sanity down the line. All right, so we've seen how Unity keeps track of them in memory, how they're referenced. Well, let's actually see how they're used. Yeah, we're finally getting to the point how you use them. So whenever you do a help bar reference, you have, I made a register reference resolve callback called on health bar result. So visual element references, whenever they actually have their references resolved, they call this callback. And if I actually go to on health bar resolved, you'll notice that it passes in a health bar here. So inside visual element reference type T, you'll notice we have reference result type, reference unloaded. So there are multiple different events that you can register to. Reference result type is literally whenever the reference is guaranteed to be properly up to date and not stale. The number one bug in UI Toolkit, I'm not kidding, the number one bug in UI Toolkit for everybody, stale references in memory. That is the reason why they have this callback. For example, you might actually, if you use a UI document, you might actually get like the, you might use a query to get a value of a UXML, and then that UI document might actually do a reload right before start. So you might have during awake or on enable a actual proper reference, but then the UI document will do a reload. And now during start, you have a reference to a visual element that's stale in memory, and you try to do something on that, and it just doesn't work. And that is literally the number one bug from all Unity devs with UI Toolkit, stale memory references. And this is what this helps solve. When the register reference result callback happens, whatever you get back in here, so this help bar is guaranteed to be in memory and not a stale value. It prevents null errors, it prevents bugs. Just use it. A lot of people, I'm going to just say right here, from a developer that has worked for over 10 years, I've worked in multiple studios. Whenever you are on bigger teams, this may seem like a lot of boiler code because one, not only you have to set the value, you also have to like register a reference result callback, yes, and all that kind of stuff. And this may seem like boilerplate code, but it will save your team headaches down the line. It'll make it easier to work with teammates because here's the thing, your teammates might have to like reference some of the stuff you do, and if they're trying to figure out why this isn't working, it could take hours to figure out bugs of like stale memory stuff. This just prevents that from happening. I've literally been on contracted on studios where people were having issues from a still memory thing, and we lost like a week's work, and we were on a time crunch already. So it may seem like boilerplate code, but this boilerplate code will save you hours of headache down the line. It will make your life a lot easier, whether you're doing solo development or team development. It's just nice. But yeah, once you reach the resolved callback and you actually have a proper in-memory value, you can do whatever you want on it. So I said like the low value equals 0. I can set like the high value equals player max health. And I can also register a value callbacks and also set the data binding source. So if I actually hit play mode, and you'll notice I have a help bar, 2020. I can decrease the help bar, increase the help bar. The registered value change callback here, this callback is actually what changes the fill bar. So as the health decrease, that's actually what's updating the fill of the UI Toolkit. So you can do stuff like that. And I also set the data source to get to 2020. So for example, here, I have current health 30, and I can have max health 40 when I enter play mode. You'll notice that, oh yeah, I made it where whenever you enter play mode, the current health instantly is set to max health on default. But as you see, the max health is 40, and you can see the current health is 24 now. So yeah, so that's how I'm actually doing data binding. So that's why this is useful. Now, you also have a unloaded callback. So if you notice, there is a unloaded callback on my buttons, but not on my help bar. Why is that? Well, if we go to the button, you'll notice that there's, the dot clicked. So you can actually, inside of your unloaded callbacks, this is actually where you can like clean up references used, or you could like remove like event calls, stuff like that. So basically, reference resolved callback for the button is where, like I said, the on increase health click, and then like the on register reference unloaded callback is where I remove that event reference. So you have both those whenever you need to actually guarantee element is ready to be used in memory, and then you have one that allows you to do cleanup in memory. Because you can actually cause bugs with like by not removing this. If you ever have like a static event or action that you're trying to register something to, you might want to make sure that you always clean it up. But yeah, that's basically the main uses of these. So reference resolved callback, set your values there, reference unloaded callback, clean up stuff. If you are not setting inside the scene and you need to set it dynamically, set a reference, panel render, and then you can set the offering ID. And just for reference, like my offering ID for my increase button is 2, my offering ID for my decrease button is 3. If I actually go to my player head, you'll notice offering ID 2, offering ID 3. That's like the biggest bulk of this, like the visual element reference. I could go into more detail, like how the panel renderer actually keeps track of everything, but that's actually going into like C++ land, and also like how the panel renderer actually keeps track of it between code and domain reloads. Do note, if most of the stuff is actually ready for like domain reload set to turned off. So like if you start using like panel renderer and stuff like that, and actually start setting up certain things, you should be good like whenever core CLR is out and ready. But that's pretty much it. If anybody's kind of curious about anything else, just tell me. There's also unregistered reference callbacks. Whenever like the panel renderer is like detaching panels, so like on panel detach, you can actually unregister them as well, like unregister all these events as well to make sure they're cleaned up. So there's a few other things here. It's not too much more. I'm not kidding. I literally got almost every single thing inside Visual Element Reference. For the most part, the things I haven't gone over goes into like the panel renderer itself, and that is like more advanced stuff. Like I'm talking like that's going into like behind the scenes, like how Unity actually creates like reference tables and like internally. Do know I'll make a video on visual element asset reference tables as well, because those are very useful. And if anybody's actually wondering like what those are, well, if I actually go to, actually no, let's do panel render here. I think there's actually a a public, oh wait, I don't think it's in 6.5. Never mind. What I was about to do is in 6.6, not 6.5. I'll make video when 6.6 actually gets a little bit more stable. But I'm ending this video here. I don't want to get too far off. But if anybody has any more questions, go ahead and ask. White Bang Flash mode, I do apologize, but I forgot to mention, I have a repo with the tutorial assets in it. Do note this is only going to be 6.5 and newer. As mentioned before in my posts and other videos, I'm focusing on newer API and trying to prevent showcasing legacy API. That way I don't create technical debt or teach people older habits that are less performant or going to be removed soon. Because I don't know about you guys, but a lot of tutorials I see on YouTube, because I get bored some days and I just like look around and see how other people make tutorials. A lot of them use a lot of legacy API that's actually being deprecated or already removed in the current version of Unity. Like they're using like Unity 6.3, but the API they showed off it's literally already removed. So there's a GitHub repo. I'll put a link inside the description. If no one knows about it, I actually have all my stuff public for the most part. Like, fun fact, my Legend of Zelda code, is all public. I literally have a public repo with all the code. Well, most of the code. I think it's like I'd say 95% of the code used inside Legend of Zelda is actually just like inside a repo. Fun fact, I also have my Metroidvania code inside a repo as well, and I also have like a early work in progress at ARPG. Do note I'm focusing 6.5 again, newer. All these are in alpha, so I apologize if you run into any bugs or stabilization. I'm finishing up stabilizing them right now. But yeah, just want to mention, like, if you guys are wanting to see the assets and how I did stuff, you can just go to GitHub repo. Anyways, thank you. Said already, like, subscribe. Yeah, no, I'm gonna have to start doing that. I gotta gain subscribers some way, because I do want to like reach more people and be able to like show cool new features. I enjoy having a community to talk to. But if there's anything you guys want change on how I do these videos, or if you enjoy me just doing random rambling and also like actually going to a little bit more deeper into certain API and how things are done behind the scenes in Unity, please tell me. If anybody has any tutorial requests, also tell me. Take it easy.